Hello, we all know about the fictional character Sherlock Holmes from the books by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle written in the 19th century.
I mean, there are, in a sense, fictional entities. For example, Sherlock Holmes, I don't think Sherlock Holmes exists. That's a fictional character.
In the same way, we only know about the fictional character God from the books in the Bible by anonymous authors written in ancient times. That's the only source. And if you think you can talk to God in your heart or that you hear the voice of His Holy Spirit in your head, these delusions have been encouraged in you by evangelists, theologians, who make their living this way. So yes, the notion of this fictional character, God, comes from people who lived before the modern times, before science had given us the best explanations for the phenomena we observe around us. They did not have explanations about those phenomena. They knew that people, they themselves, can design and make things. So the only thing they could think of was that someone in their own image, but with human characteristics lifted to a lot higher degree, has designed and made everything in the world.
In one sense, I don't think you can prove the existence of God. If you mean by God everything revealed in Scripture, I don't think you can prove that that is true. In another sense, I think you can prove the existence of God, because I think you can prove by strictly rational arguments, not depending on any faith or any divine revelation at all, I think you can prove that there exists a being that has at least some uniquely divine attributes. I think you can prove a thin slice of God. For instance, if you can prove that there is a being that created the universe.
Evangelists have to admit that the ancient sources for the notion of God are not good enough. The fictional character of God is evident. So now, in order to continue making money, they dedicate all their efforts in using the gaps of knowledge of science in their audience. I suspect one of those gaps is the laws of probability.
Everything that exists owes its being to God, and I would say was brought into being by God at a specific time.
This is a fancy way of saying God made it all in such a way that 13.7 billion years later, the present world with intelligent people in it will transpire. The laws of probability, the probabilistic nature of causality, say that this is sheer and utter nonsense. I will read to you only the introduction in Lev Tarasov's book, The World is Built on Probability. In the book follow the scientific laws of probability with their mathematical equations and graphs.
Even God can't violate the principle of causality.
Introduction. A discussion on the role of chance. Reader, you wrote some nice words about chance in the preface. In spite of them, I still think chance plays a negative role on the whole. Naturally, there is good luck, but everybody knows it is better not to count on it. Chance interferes with our plans, so it's better not hang on it. We should rather ward it off as much as possible. Author. That is exactly the traditional attitude towards the random. However, it is an attitude we must clearly review. First of all, is it really possible to get by without the random? Reader. I don't know that it's possible. I said we should try. Author. Suppose you work at an ambulance center. Obviously, you cannot foresee when an ambulance will be needed, where it will be necessary to send it to, and how much time the patient will require. But a practical decision depends on all of these points. How many doctors should be on duty at any one time? On the one hand, they should not be idle waiting for calls for long periods of time, yet on the other hand, patients should not have to remain without aid for too long. You cannot avoid chance. What I'm trying to say is, we cannot eliminate chance, and so we must take it into account. Reader. True, we have to make peace with chance in this example. However, it still is a negative factor. Author. Thus, we see that sometimes we have to take chance into consideration rather than control it. But we can go further. we can discover situations in which chance becomes a positive factor rather than a negative one, so that it is desirable to raise the level of the random threshold. Reader, I don't understand you. Author, of course, chance occasions interfere with our plans. At the same time, however, it makes us seek new solutions and improve our ability to create. Reader, do you mean an improvement is obtained by overcoming difficulties? Author, the main point is that randomness can create new possibilities. An American writer has written an interesting science fiction story. A group of scientists with various disciplines is officially informed that a sensational discovery has been made, but unfortunately the discoverer died in an explosion during a demonstration of the phenomenon, and thus the secret was lost. In reality, neither the invention nor the inventor ever existed. The scientists were presented with the evidence of a tragedy: indistinct fragments of records, a library, and an equipped laboratory. In other words, the scientists were given a vast quantity of unconnected information with chance data from various fields of science and technology. The evidence could be called informational noise. The scientists were certain a discovery had been made, and therefore the target was achievable. They utilized all the information at their disposal and revealed the secret of the non-existing invention. We might say that they succeeded in sifting information from the noise. Reader, but that's only a science fiction story. Author, true, however, the idea behind the story is far from being fiction. Any discovery is related to the use of random factors. Reader, I don't think anyone can discover anything important unless he or she has a professional grasp of the subject. Author, I think so too. Moreover, a discovery requires both expertise on the part of the researcher and a certain level of the development within the science as a whole. And yet, random factors play a fundamental role in that. Reader, as I understand, the word fundamental means something primary, something at the basis. Can you apply the term fundamental to something random? I admit that randomness may be useful, but can it be fundamental? In the last analysis, we deal with random variables when there is something we do not know and cannot take into account. Author, by believing that randomness is related to inadequate knowledge, you make it subjective. It follows that you believe that randomness appears, as it were, on the surface, and that there is nothing random at the basis of the phenomena. Is it correct? Reader, precisely. That is why we cannot assert randomness is fundamentality. As science develops, our ability to take different factors into account increases, and the result is that the domain of random variables will gradually recede. There is sense in saying that science is the enemy of chance. Author, you are not quite right. Indeed, the advance of science enhances our ability to make scientific predictions, that is, science is against the random factor. But at the same time, it turns out that while our scientific knowledge becomes deeper, or more accurately, while we look at the molecular and atomic aspects of phenomena, randomness not only does not become less important, but, on the contrary, it reigns supreme. Its existence proves to be independent of the degree of our knowledge. Randomness reveals its fundamentality at the level of the microcosm. Reader, this is the first time I've heard someone say that. Please tell me more. Author, let me say at once that this topic has had a long history. It was first formalized in ancient Greece with two approaches to the random being stated. The two views are associated with the names of Democritus and Epicurus. Democritus identified the random with the unknown, believing that nature is completely deterministic. He said, people have created an idol out of the random as a cover for their inability to think things out. Epicurus considered that the random is inherent in various phenomena, and that it is, therefore, objective. Democritus's point of view was preferred for a long time, but in the 20th century the progress of science showed that Epicurus was right. Of course, we should not exaggerate the contribution of Epicurus to our understanding of the random, because he could only guess. Reader, it turns out that I presented Democritus's views on the random without knowing it, but I would like to have some concrete examples showing the fundamentality of the random. Author, consider for instance a nuclear-powered submarine. How is the engine started? Reader, as far as I understand it, special neutron-absorbing rods are drawn from the core of the reactor. Then, a controlled chain reaction involving the fission of uranium nuclei begins. Author, interrupting, let us try and see how everything begins. Reader, after entering a uranium nucleus, a neutron triggers its disintegration into two fragments and another neutron is released. The neutrons split two more uranium nuclei. 4 neutrons are then set free, which in turn split 4 more nuclei. The process develops like an avalanche. Author, all right, but where does the first neutron come from? Reader, who knows? Say they come from cosmic rays. Author, the submarine is deep underwater. The thick layer of water protects it from cosmic rays. Reader, well then, I don't know. Author, the fact is that a uranium nucleus may either split because a neutron enters it, or it may decay spontaneously. The process of spontaneous nuclear fission is random. Reader, but maybe spontaneous nuclear fission is caused by factors we do not know about yet. Author, this is something physicists have been trying to solve. Many attempts have been made to find the hidden parameters which govern the processes in the microcosm. It has been concluded that there are no such parameters, and therefore randomness in the microcosm is fundamental. This cornerstone problem is thoroughly treated in quantum mechanics, a theory which appeared in the early 20th century in connection with research on atomic processes. Reader, the only thing I know about quantum mechanics is that it describes the laws governing the behavior of elementary particles. Author, we shall talk about quantum mechanics in more detail later. Let me only note here that it demonstrates the fundamental role of spontaneous processes and therefore demonstrates the fundamentality of the random. The operation of any radiation generator from a vacuum tube to a laser would be impossible without spontaneous processes. They are fundamental as the trigger without which the radiation generation would not start. Reader, and yet it is difficult for me to believe that randomness is fundamental. You mentioned a nuclear-powered submarine. When the captain orders that the engines should be turned on, he does not rely on a lucky chance. An appropriate button is pressed and the engines start, in brackets, if they are in good condition. The same can be said when a vacuum tube is turned on. Where is the randomness here? Author, nevertheless, when we consider phenomena in the microcosm, the processes are triggered by random factors. Reader, however, we generally deal with processes occurring in the macrocosm. Author, firstly, while studying the world around us and trying to comprehend its cause and effect relations, we must address the atomic level, i.e., the level of microcosm phenomena. Secondly, the randomness in microcosmic phenomena is essentially reflected in the processes observed at the macroscopic scale. Reader, can you give me an example when the fundamentality of randomness reveals itself at the macroscopic scale? Author, evolution, which is a continuous process in both the plant and animal kingdoms, may serve as an example. Evolution relies on mutation, i.e., random changes in the structure of genes. A random mutation may be rapidly spread by the reproduction of the organisms themselves. It is essential that selection occurs simultaneously with mutation. The organisms which contain the random gene are then selected so that those best fitted to their environment survive. In consequence, evolution requires the selection of random gene changes. Reader, I don't quite understand this business of selection. Author, here is an example. The flowers of a certain orchid look like a female wasp. They are pollinated by male wasps, which take the flowers to be females. Suppose a mutation occurs and the shape and color of the flower are changed. The flower will then remain unpollinated. The result is that the mutation is not passed on to the new generation. It may be said that selection rejected the mutation which changed the outward appearance of the flower. There was a species of orchid which became a self-pollinator. The flowers of this species rapidly acquired diverse shape and color owing to the mutation. Reader, as far as I know, evolution progresses in the direction of the differentiation of species. Doesn't this show that the mutations underlying evolution are not, in fact, random? Author, that argument doesn't stand to reason. Evolution selects the fittest organisms rather than the more complex. Sometimes a highest degree of organization is preferable, but sometimes this is not the case. This is why human beings, jellyfish, and the influenza virus can coexist in today's world. It is essential that evolution leads to the appearance of new species that are unpredictable in principle. It may be said that any species is unique because it occurred fundamentally by chance. Reader, I have to admit that the randomness does look to be a fundamental factor indeed. Author, since we are discussing the fundamentality of randomness in the picture of evolution, let me draw your attention to one more important point. Modern science demonstrates that chance and selection are the creator, in inverted commas. Reader, it appears that when speaking about chance and selection, we should apply the selection of information from noise, shouldn't we? The same selection that we discussed in connection with the science fiction story. Author, absolutely. Reader, I have to agree that we should consciously recognize the existence of randomness rather than try and control it. Author, we could say more. Naturally, the randomness which is due to the incompleteness of our knowledge is undesirable. While studying the world, man has fought, is fighting, and will continue to fight it. It should be noted at the same time that there is an objective randomness underlying every phenomena, along with the subjective randomness which is due to lack of data on a phenomenon. We should also take into account the positive creative role of the random, and in this connection it is really necessary to recognize and control randomness. Man should be able, when necessary, to create special situations abundant with the random and utilize the situations to his own ends. Reader, but is it really possible to treat randomness in such a way? Isn't it like trying to control the uncontrollable? Author, both science and daily life indicate that it is possible to orient ourselves consciously in very random situations. Special calculation methods have been developed that depend on randomness. Special theories have been produced, such as queuing theory, the theory of games, and the theory of random search, to deal with it. Reader, it is hard for me to imagine a scientific theory built on randomness. Author, let me emphasize right away that randomness does not preclude scientific prediction. The fundamentality of randomness does not mean that the world around us is chaotic and devoid of order. Randomness does not imply that there are no causal relations, but we shall deal with all that later. It is interesting to try and imagine a world in which randomness is, as an objective factor, is completely absent. Reader, anything occurring in such a world would be predetermined. Author, Pierre Laplace, a great French scientist of the 17th century, suggested in this connection that we imagine a super being who knew the past and the future of such a world in every detail. Laplace wrote, "The intellect who could know at a given moment every force that animates the nature and the relative positions of its every component, and would, in addition, be vast enough to analyze these data, would describe by a single formula the motions of the greatest bodies in the universe and the motions of the lightest atoms. There would be nothing uncertain for this being, and the future, like the past, would be open to his gaze. Reader, an ideally ordered world is therefore unreal. Author, as you see, it isn't hard to feel that the real world should admit the existence of objective randomness. Now let us return to the problem of causal relations. These relations are probabilistic in the real world. It is only in particular cases, for example when solving maths problems at school, that we deal with unambiguous, strictly determined relations. Here we approach one of the most essential notions of the modern science, the notion of probability. Reader, I'm familiar with it. If I throw a die, I can equally expect any number of dots from 1 to 6. The probability of each number is the same and equal to 1/6. Author, suppose you stand at the side of a road with motor cars passing by. What is the probability of the first 2 digits in their 4-digit number plates being equal? Reader, the probability equals 1/10. Author, therefore, if you are patient and observe enough cars, about 1/10 of them will have number plates with the same first 2 digits, would they? Say about 30 cars out of 300 will have such plates, maybe 27 or 32, but not 10 or 100. Reader, I think so. Author, but then there would be no need to stand at the roadside. The result could be predicted. This is an example of probabilistic prediction. Look at how many random factors are involved in this situation. A car could turn off the road before reaching the observer, or another car could stop or even turn back. And nonetheless, both today and tomorrow, about 30 cars out of 300 would have plates with the same first 2 digits. Reader, so, in spite of numerous random factors, the situation has a certain constancy. Author, this constancy is commonly called statistical stability. It is essential that statistical stability is observed because of random factors rather than despite them. Reader, I hadn't thought that we deal with probabilistic predictions everywhere. They include, for instance, sports predictions and weather forecasts. Author, you're absolutely right. An important point is that probabilistic, statistical, causal relations are common, while those leading to unambiguous predictions are just a special case, while definite predictions only presuppose the necessity of a phenomenon. Probabilistic predictions are related simultaneously both with necessity and randomness. Thus, mutations are random, but the process of selection is governed by laws. That is, it is a necessary prerequisite. Reader, I see. The individual acts of the spontaneous fission of uranium nuclei are random, but the development of the chain reaction is unavoidable. Author, taken separately, any discovery is random. However, a situation which is favorable for the appearance of such a chance should exist. This chance is determined by the advance of science, the expertise of the researchers, and the level of measurement technology. A discovery is random, but the logic of the progress leading to the discovery in the long run is regular, unavoidable, and necessary. Reader, now I see why the fundamentality of randomness does not result in the disorder of our world. Randomness and necessity are always combined. Author, correct. The Hungarian mathematician A. Rényi wrote about the same thing in an interesting book, Letters on Probability. I came across contemplations by Marcus Aurelius and accidentally opened the page where he wrote about 2 possibilities. The world is either in vast chaos or, otherwise, order and regularity reign supreme. and although I had read these lines many times, it was the first time that I thought over why Marcus Aurelius believed that the world should be dominated either by chance or by order. Why did he believe that these two possibilities are contradictory? The world is dominated by randomness, but order and regularity operate at the same time, being shaped out of the mass of random events according to the laws of the random. Reader, as far as I understand, order and regularity are produced from a mass of random events, and this leads to the concept of probability. Author, you are absolutely right. Individual factors vary from case to case. At the same time, the picture as a whole remains stable. This stability is expressed in terms of probability. This is why our world proves to be flexible, dynamic, and capable of advancing. Reader, it follows that the world around us may justly be said to be a world of probability. Author, it is better to speak of the world as being built on probability. When we examine this world, we shall concentrate on two groups of questions. Firstly, I shall show how man, owing to his use of probability in science and technology, was able to, in inverted commas, tame randomness and thus turn it from being his enemy into an ally and friend. Secondly, using the achievements of modern physics and biology, I shall demonstrate the probabilistic features of the laws of nature. In consequence, I shall show that the world around us, in brackets including both the natural and the artificial world, is really built on probability. Bye!